Whenever I'm asked about what happened that night at my grandmother's house, I'm silent for a while, wondering if it's worth reliving everything that happened. I was 9 years old at the time. It was a hot Saturday, and my grandmother's house was packed as always with the family gathered for a birthday. That kind of date where you get lost in the conversations and laughter of adults, while cousins wander around the house, trying to get rid of those endless conversations. It was one of those days when we just wanted to get away and play. That day we all went after the famous game that everyone knew, the ghost hunt in the back of the house. Our parents always talked about these stories, fueled by rumors and some old objects that grandmother kept there. Me, Lucas, Ben, Sarah, Jason, and Alex, we all got together to explore the back of the house. For us, it was the perfect fun, something a little darker than playing hide and seek or tag. The back of the house was an abandoned area, full of old boxes, broken toys, and rooms that seemed to have never been used. We always heard stories that at night, these parts of the house came to life, and the lights didn't seem to shine the same way. We thought it was funny, of course, but there was something about this place that never made me feel at ease. But no one seemed to care except me. Or maybe it was just the feeling that this place had something strange about it, something we couldn't understand at the time. With cell phone flashlights in hand, we advanced to the little room that was at the end of the hallway. The shadows of the trees swaying outside made the place look even darker, almost as if it was breathing. Everyone was talking, laughing and making jokes about the ghost that supposedly inhabited the house. But soon the game took a strange turn. A small box thrown in the corner of the room began to move. At first, it seemed like something in our head, but then the box slid as if it was being pulled by something invisible. The laughter stopped immediately. I looked at the others, who seemed disconcerted. Then Ben, who had always been the most skeptical of the group, stepped forward, as if to prove that this was just a coincidence. That's when the toys in the trunk next door started to move on their own. The noise of plastic scratching the floor was enough to make me freeze. Sarah began to cry softly, and Jason was visibly pale. The bravest, or perhaps more impulsive, three decided to stay and investigate what was going on. Alex and I stayed further back, looking scared, while the others advanced towards the little room. That's when I saw something that I can't explain to this day. The light of Jason's flashlight illuminated a dark corner of the room, and there standing was a child. She wore dirty, worn-out clothes that seemed to be in ruins, as if she had been left there long ago. Her gaze paralyzed me. It was not an ordinary look. It was empty, but at the same time it seemed full of something, as if he were crossing me. The worst was when she smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It was something disconcerting, an expression that seemed to know more than it should. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move a part of my body, not even breathe properly. The others didn't seem to have noticed what I was seeing, or maybe they were trying to ignore it. But that child, she was there, standing, watching, as if she knew. She was being watched. The silence was absolute for a second that seemed to last an eternity. Then she took a step back, disappearing into the shadows from which she had appeared, as if disintegrating into thin air. There wasn't a sound, just the light from Jason's flashlight flickering. We all looked around, trying to understand what was happening, but there was no explanation. The lights began to flicker, and what was already strange became something even more sinister. I was the first to break the silence. I shouted, calling the others to get out of there, but no one moved. When finally everyone turned to leave the room, I noticed something worse. The child was there again, right in the middle of the hallway. She was closer, more visible, with her gaze fixed, even more penetrating. There was no more room to escape. It was as if an invisible force was holding us there, forcing us to face that being. Ben, who never believed in these things, was the first to try to walk away, but something stopped him. It was not a physical barrier, but a feeling of dread, something that immobilized him, as if he were trapped there by the child's own will. She took a few steps back and suddenly disappeared. It simply disappeared before our eyes. There was no screaming. There was no explanation. Alex, Sarah, and I started screaming, running toward the door, not looking back. But by the time we reached the end of the hallway, the entrance was blocked. The door that had previously been open was now completely locked, and it seemed as if an invisible pressure was keeping us there in the darkness. Fear was taking hold of all of us. Jason, with the flashlight shaking in his hands, seemed to be trying to find a solution. But when he looked into the corner, the child was there, even closer, with the distorted smile on his face. At that moment, everything became a nightmare, as if time was stopping. I no longer knew if it was really happening or if we were all delirious with fear. The child, that presence, seemed to have gained control of the environment. When we finally managed to get out, running out of control, she disappeared. But the feeling of being watched stayed for much longer. Years have passed since that night. I was 17 years old when I returned to my grandmother's house. It was an ordinary weekend, or at least it should be. I was going there to help with some things, and to be honest, I didn't want to go. Something in that house always moved me, and the worst of all was knowing that I couldn't get that image out of my head, the child's gaze, that blank stare, but that he seemed to know more than he should. When I arrived, the house was the same, as always, but as I crossed the hallway, a strange sensation invaded me. It was as if the place had changed, or maybe it was just my head. The air was heavier, the shadows seemed deeper. I was trying to push those memories away, trying to pretend it was all my childhood stuff, but the further I walked, the more the memories came back with force. It all happened when I decided to go to the back of the house. I didn't really know why, but the need to revisit that place seemed greater than the fear I felt. That little room at the end of the corridor was still there, but it looked even older, more abandoned. The place, which had previously seemed uninteresting, now gave me a chill. The cell phone flashlights no longer made sense, as if the light, there was never enough to dispel the shadows. I was practically paralyzed at the same point I had been when I was a child, but now the memories weren't leaving me alone. Then, before I could decide whether to continue or return, I saw her. The child was there again, but now she was no longer a child. She looked older, but still with that stare, that crooked smile. The difference is that this time, she was not in the hallway. No, she was right there inside the little room watching me. I tried to move, try to understand what was happening, but I couldn't. It was as if she was hypnotizing me, only this time there was no more room to question. That being, that thing that had haunted me for so long was there, and he didn't seem to want to leave. She began to move in the direction of where I was, slowly, as if she was having fun with my terror. My body trembled, and the feeling of not being able to breathe was unbearable. Before I could do anything, she disappeared, like a shadow that fades into the night. I wanted to believe that what I saw wasn't real, that it was just a manifestation of my mind, but no matter how hard I tried to rationalize, the sensation wouldn't let me. The child, that being, had returned. It wasn't a hallucination, it wasn't a nightmare. I could feel her weight in the air. I could feel her presence around me, as if the whole house was somehow connected to her. I remember running back into the room, but the environment felt different now. The walls seemed to close in on me. The corridors stretched endlessly, as if the house had grown since the last time I was there. The sound of my own footsteps seemed muffled, as if the place was trying to swallow me. When I entered the main room, I found the grandmother sitting in the armchair, looking at me with that curious look, as if she had been waiting for me all along. But something about her was strange too. She was too still, with a smile that didn't look natural. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't get out. The words I wanted to say got stuck in my throat. I tried to ask about the child, about what had happened on the night of that birthday, but he just shook his head slowly, as if he didn't understand the question. That's when I realized. She knew. She knew what I had seen and what was happening, but she couldn't speak, as if she had been forced to keep this secret. The air in the room was dense, as if something was choking my every breath. In a moment of anxiety and dread, I decided to look for answers. Something that could somehow explain what it was all about. I had already heard about supernatural things. I needed answers. I took out my cell phone and started researching things about the address of my grandmother's house. The results were not at all comforting. I discovered that the house had been built at the beginning of the 20th century and that, over the years, several families had lived there. But one of the stories caught my attention, that of a child who disappeared in the 1950s. Apparently, she lived with a family that was there before us. The child had last been seen playing in the back of the house. But what gave me goosebumps was what the report said. After she disappeared, the other residents were never able to get out of there. They said that the child's spirit was still lurking. My throat dried as I read those words. It was as if everything I had experienced was finally making sense. I then decided to go back to the back of the house. No matter how hard I tried to resist, the feeling that the child or whatever it was watching me consumed me. I needed to understand. I needed to know if it all had an end or if I was stuck in some kind of cycle, like a nightmare that never ended. When I got to the little room, the air was even heavier than before, and the door was ajar as if it were calling me. I hesitated for a moment, but entered. The place was empty except for an old rocking chair that was rocking on its own, as if someone had just gotten up from it. The sound of the movement of the chair was soft, but at the same time cutting, as if he was trying to tell me something. It was then that I saw her again, closer than ever, the child, or the being who had taken. Jade was there in the center of the little room, staring at me with those piercing eyes. There was no longer a smile. Now she looked more serious, more human, but at the same time his eyes were empty, as if his soul had been ripped out. She approached me without making a sound, and I was frozen, unable to move. But before he got close enough, something strange happened. The child stopped as if he had realized that I was there, but without fear. Instead, she watched me for a long second, as if she was waiting for me to do something. Then, without warning, he disappeared. It wasn't like the previous times, where she simply disappeared into a shadow. No, it fell apart, as if it had been absorbed into the house itself, and the little room, which had previously seemed to suffocate, was now empty, calm. When I left there, the weight in the air dissipated. I went to the living room where my grandmother was still sitting. She looked at me with a sad and tired smile, as if she knew that moment had finally come. She didn't say anything, but I could see in her eyes that she had also experienced that, or something very similar. Maybe she was the last person there who knew what really happened. I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I took my things and left, sure that I would never return. To this day, I don't know what really happened that night. If it was just a joke that took a strange turn, or if there was something real, something deeper going on there. What I do know is that after that day, I was never able to see the house in the same way again. The child's gaze, his empty eyes, continue to haunt me. And even now, years later, I can swear that I sometimes see a shadow moving through the dark corners of the house, waiting to meet me again.